The Standard Wheel Company decided to expand into automobiles and created the Overland Automobile Company in 1903. Starting with a rather advanced front-mounted 5-horsepower water-cooled single, priced at under $600. 11 were produced the first year. Sales were slow, but development wasn't, adding a twin for 1904 and a 4-cylinder for 1905, as well as shaft drive and a steering wheel replaced the tiller. But the company would quickly be sold off, going through a number of owners over the next few years, finally ending up in the hands of John Willys in 1908, who renamed the company Willys Overland in 1912, the same year that Overland bumped Buick from the number 2 sales position in the U.S. The following year, they would begin building cars that used the Knight sleeve valve engine design, sold as the Willys Knight, and they would continue buying up assets through the decade, including Russell Motors, that would become their Canadian subsidy. But by decade's end, their fortunes had turned, facing new competition from the likes of Chevy and Dodge, meaning Overland was soon selling off those recently acquired assets, including Autolite spark plugs and Curtiss Aircraft. So Walter Chrysler was brought in to reorganize the company, and it wasn't long before Willys Overland was expanding again, purchasing the Stearns luxury car brand in 1925 and introducing the budget Whippet line a year later. But with the Great Depression, Stearns, Whippet, and Willys Knight would all go away, although one could argue that it was the Whippet that survived going forward, as the Whippet pickup would continue production as the light-duty international pickup, and the Willys 77 of 1933 would be America's cheapest car of the period. Starting under $500, it had a 100-inch wheelbase, was 2,100 pounds, and was powered by a 48-horsepower 2.4-liter inline-4. But they were once again in receivership and selling off assets, including their Canadian subsidy, managing to survive once again. The Model 77 design would carry the company going forward, being popular with hot rodders due to its light weight, with a major update in 1937 and a minor styling update in 1940. But everything would change with the military contract to build command reconnaissance vehicles, with an initial order of 16,000 of the Military Model B, or MB vehicles, derived from an earlier American Bantam design. It was only 132 inches long and less than 2,500 pounds, powered by a 60-horsepower Go Devil 4. The vehicles would earn the nickname Jeep, a name that predates them by several years. But Willys would trademark it in 1950, as well as the 7-slot grille design. Although by this point, Willys was more often called Willys. A civilian version of the Jeep was being developed well before the end of the war, and would go into production in July 1945 as the CJ2A, intended as a farm vehicle, with the sort of duties that would now typically be done by an ATV. In 1946, they introduced the Jeep utility wagon, and a pickup version arrived a year later. And 1948 would see the rear-wheel drive only Jeepster Phaeton. Although they would continue to provide vehicles for the military, not only Jeeps, but other vehicles such as the Mule, a sort of 4-wheel drive flatbed go-kart. The civilian Jeep would become the CJ3 in 1949, with changes to accommodate the newer, bigger Hurricane engines. Passenger car production returned in 1952 with the Aero. It was 183 inches long on a 108-inch wheelbase, with your choice of 4 or 6-cylinder engines. Starting at $1,700, roughly 20,000 were produced the first year. The following year, Willys Overland would be taken over by Kaiser, with Overland being dropped from the name, except by their new subsidy in Brazil, and a 4-speed manual would become available on all models. Updated versions of the Jeep, the CJ5 and the long-wheelbase CJ6, were introduced in 1955, as well as the DJ series delivery Jeep, also called the Dispatcher or Mail Jeep. But the CJ3 would be sold alongside them for another dozen years or so. The Aero sedan would be discontinued after 1955, although production would return in Brazil through the 1960s. The forward control trucks and vans would be introduced in 1956, and starting in 1959, there would be an open-bodied version of the DJ as a resort car, sometimes called the Jeep Gala or Surrey. In 1963, the company was renamed Kaiser Jeep, and Willys would be phased out. The same year, the Jeep utility wagon and pickup would be replaced by the new Jeep Wagoneer wagon and Gladiator pickup, being more in line with the full-size trucks of the big three. The cab-over trucks would be discontinued after 1965, but the Jeepster returned as the Commando after a 15-year hiatus, now available with four-wheel drive. Jeep would be sold to AMC in 1970, and the focus would shift from utility work vehicles to outdoor lifestyle sport vehicles. And their general contracting division that produced government and military Jeeps would be spun off to become AM General. The Gladiator pickup would become the J Series in 1971, with the names becoming even more simplified in 1974. Also in 1974, the Commando was replaced by a two-door version of the Wagoneer, named the Cherokee. Jeep dubbed it a sport utility vehicle, the first use of a phrase that would later catch on. The CJ7 was introduced in 1976, at 148 inches long on a 93-inch wheelbase, weighing 2,700 pounds. It was bigger than the CJ5 that would stay in production into the 1980s, and it also included revised suspension for better on-road ride and handling. In 1981, the CJ6 was replaced by a long wheelbase version of the CJ7 as the CJ8, most of which came with the Scrambler appearance package. The same year, a special version of the J10 pickup was introduced with CJ styling, dubbed the CJ10. Its focus was more as a commercial vehicle. By this point, AMC was under the control of Renault, who had started the development of a compact SUV, arriving for 1984 taking on the Wagoneer and Cherokee names, with the old Cherokee being discontinued and the old Wagoneer becoming the Grand Wagoneer, while the DJ series and military Jeep production would come to an end, as AM General would transition to manufacturing the Humvee, and would later be purchased by GM. The pickup version of the Cherokee arrived 2 years later as the Comanche, easily winning the compact pickup horsepower war with its 190 horsepower 4-liter straight six. About the same time, the Wrangler replaced the CJ, once again updating the classic design to be more road-friendly, with a less metal interior, heavier suspension, and sway bars. A year later, Chrysler would take control of AMC Jeep, killing off the J-Series pickup after 1988. The Grand Wagoneer survived until 1991, and the compact Comanche pickup until 1992. To replace the Grand Wagoneer, Jeep introduced the Grand Cherokee in 1993. Over its nearly 30 years, the Wagoneer had transitioned from basic utility wagon to a classic luxury wagon, but the Grand Cherokee still helped move Jeep significantly upmarket. A new Wrangler for 1996 tried once again to improve on-road drivability without losing its off-road prowess, and look like a more traditional Jeep. The following year, the Cherokee would see updates to make it more civilized, with such changes as hidden hinges on the hatch. After nearly 3 million were sold, the Cherokee was replaced in 2002 with the Liberty, a vehicle that was significantly more modern than the one it replaced, but still managed to look more like a traditional Jeep. The Grand Cherokee would move away from its humble Cherokee origins with its third generation of 2005, truck-based with crossover refinement and engines ranging from a Mercedes diesel to a Hemi V8. The new Wrangler of the following year added a 4-door model and did away with the classic AMC door handles. The same year, Jeep would introduce a pair of compact crossovers, the Patriot and Compass, essentially the same vehicle with what some referred to as his and hers styling. And although neither were serious off-roaders, the Patriot at least received a trail-rated badge. And these allowed the Liberty to move up market for 2008, with a new look that was supposed to be somewhat reminiscent of the Cherokee. The new Grand Cherokee of 2011 gained a high-performance SRT8 version, and the Compass would get Junior Grand Cherokee styling. And although the Cherokee name had remained in some markets for use on the Liberty, it returned to the U.S. for 2014 as a mid-size crossover to replace the more truck-like Liberty. In 2015, Jeep introduced the Renegade Cute Ute, a subcompact SUV based on the Fiat 500X. Soon there would be a stretched version, taking on the Compass name, while the Patriot was dropped. The Wrangler would be redesigned in 2017, once again attempting to be more civilized and retain its tradition. And a pickup version would arrive 2 years later, reviving the Gladiator name. The new Grand Cherokee of 2021 shared its platform with Alfa Romeo and Maserati, while the new Wagoneer of the same year is basically a wagon version of the Dodge Ram. In an era where SUVs rule, Jeep finds itself stuck between finding modern relevant models and retaining its heritage as the legendary off-road vehicle that came out of the Second World War. And although most Jeep copycats have evolved into more modern SUVs, you can still get a very Jeep-like Wrangler, and the equivalent of the CJ3 is still being built under license as an ATV. So as always, thanks for watching. Don't forget to comment below and like and subscribe.